Hey, Hardin County, it's Michelle again, and I wanted to report on something I saw on the Save Hardin County page. Now, I know a lot of people think that I am part of that page, but I'm very not. They're just very supportive of my vision and goal for Hardin County, and so I am definitely thankful for them for that, but I don't actually do any of the posts. Sometimes I respond if I feel like I have information to share. But, anyways, for anybody who's wondering, I really am just like you, kind of reading what is posted out there. So I saw that, and it is something that I have thought a lot about and am currently investigating and trying to figure out how this whole process works with the purchase of the administrative building from the school by the commissioners, right? And so definitely an interesting thing. So just to try and give you a little bit of history that I know, I just have very little information that I know or can find. I can share with you what I have. And that's basically over the last year, we've had, of course, a lot of activity with Hardin Hills and the property there. And so as Hardin Hills kind of winds down, I don't know if there was actually an executive session that would have been buying and purchasing property that would fall into this new property, or if it was really the Hardin Hills property. So I can't say definitively on any of that if there was an executive session there. And I know from the history of, like, the prosecutor's office, I think, has come in and asked about putting additional shelves on, like, a wall in their office so that they have more box storage in their, they're down there in the basement. So they've come in and talked about that. We have storage. We used to have storage out at Hardin Hills, and that's been emptied out because now that's going to be an abandoned building. And so the health department has had to take some of that storage back. The health department is completely filled up. I don't know if it's because of the way they manage their storage or what the deal is at the health department, but they don't have a lot of space over there. Hardin Hills files are being stored over in the soil and water building, which is the north annex, but it's got mold and water issues, and they have to fix the floor. And so, not a great storage over there. They have storage over at Harco building, the old Harco building there by the Simon Kenton, also by the north annex, right? They're all kind of like right in there. And the commissioners they don't have a great idea of how to use that building. I know some of the office space is sort of rented out over there, and then the rest of it's really kind of open. So, definitely a place that can be utilized as office space, or, you could have locked storage in there. They have bought shelves to put in kind of where the industry place, where they had the industry and there's all kinds of things in there. There's pictures and boxes and all kinds of storage in there. And so definitely, I feel we have places. You have to manage the storage in those places, but we already own them. And up at the courthouse in the attic area, they've been told that it's a fire hazard to have things up there, especially when you have old papers that are up there. A lot of the journals from the commissioners is, I think, stored up in the attic, and so they are having to clean that out so that it's free of fire hazards up there. So anyway, so those are kind of the things I've heard over the last year, kind of here and there as far as storage. I have heard nothing in the commissioner's office that I know of that pertains to, outside of what I've already told you, that has anything to do with storage, of not having enough space, or or the commissioner not having enough space. I mean, they just built that really nice cabinet for their front office with the little swing doors, so it's kind of blocked off to the public, and you have to gain entrance to those doors to get to the public meeting room, which is also the commissioner's office, right? You see there are 3 desks right there. I don't know that it's real often that all three of them are there at the same time, because you can kind of come and go during the week as you want. I know I saw Joe kind of walking into the courthouse this morning, so maybe he's going there to do some work. Nobody else might be there, and it's pretty common. Like Logan County, they also have their desks kind of all in a row that they share one room, and use the other parts of their office space for people who maybe work full time and have other different needs. And so, so I haven't heard them talk about needing additional space. As far as, so when we kind of heard that the commissioners were looking at this building, I did go on and found out that because it's a school-owned property, that the commissioners kind of have the first right of refusal, so they get to, as long as the school board and the commissioners agree on the terms, it's just kind of a straight buy across the board. There's no bidding, there's no hearings, there's not really any of that, which brings me back to the sunshine laws that, one, we haven't heard anything. So there's been zero discussion that I'm aware of or that I've seen in any meeting minutes. So the meeting minutes by the clerk are the official record, right? So if I take a video and it says one thing and the meeting minutes say another thing, the meeting minutes are, by the clerk, by law, are the gold standard. You may have to charge the clerk with falsifying records, and show that the minutes that were submitted were wrong. But in a court of law, it's always the clerk who has the legal high ground in that matter. So I haven't seen any of that, any type of discussion on needing additional office space or storage. The other thing we've talked a lot about is the executive session. So maybe they talked about this purchase in executive session. I don't know if that holds for this kind of property, because in order to have an executive session for the purchase of a property, you have to be able to prove that if you release that information, it's going to give somebody else a competitive edge on purchasing that property. So if you go and, let's say you're buying a property and they say, oh, I'm going to buy that property for $10,000, and somebody hears that, then another bidder is going to come in and say, oh, I'm going to buy it for $12,000, right? So you may say that you're going to purchase a building, but you may not name which building, and you may not name the price, because those would create competition, right, or unfair competition. And so when you have a situation where two entities are just agreeing on terms, I don't know if that is sufficient for competition, to prove that there's competition. So that would definitely be something that would have to be referred back to, I guess it would have to go to like the Attorney General to make a ruling on that. I mean, somebody would have to challenge it first to say, hey, you did this in executive session and it doesn't warrant executive session type of thing. But, so that's an interesting dynamic with the purchase of the building anyhow, right? So as far as, they can purchase the building, that's not a big deal. Now, they did report that the clerk of courts was the one who had the money. They had the $150,000 to purchase this property, right? And it was for the clerk of courts. I don't understand that. I don't know all the ins and outs of the finances of the county, but the commissioners are the only ones who have the right to purchase property. That's why everybody comes to the commissioners in regards to their buildings. They purchase them. They do the upkeep on them. They're the only legal ones. They are the ones who put the levies on, because that's their role, is to kind of hold that real property. So how the clerk of courts ends up with an extra $150,000 in their bank account, to purchase this doesn't make any sense to me. It would be a capital improvement and would come out of the capital improvement fund. So not sure about that. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that the clerk of courts has a office. So there was a realignment of the judges in the courthouse. I don't know how long ago, with Judge Christopher, and the clerk, who she used to clerk maybe for one spot, but then they combined the courts, and so now it'd be Stephanie Epling, but she now clerks for two entities, right? So she has the title office, which is housed out at the BMV, out there on 309. So she has an office out there where she does her title work, and she said that this building would then be the same as that kind of scenario, where it's kind of an office offsite. Now, here's the thing. You don't have to have these offices in the courthouse. Logan County, the commissioners are housed offsite. Not, they're across the street from the courthouse, and so it doesn't matter where you are. As long as it's a government-owned building and the commissioners are still in charge of it, you can kind of be wherever it is that you need to be. And so there's been some conflicting information as far as some people think that the BMV and the title office are then going to be housed in the administrative building, right? So they're kind of bringing all that back into this place, and maybe they'll sell that building out there. I don't know. The other thing was maybe the clerk of courts is just moving into that building out of the courthouse. Those were kind of the questions that I was asking, because I do know that Senate Bill 94 was passed years ago and made the clerk of courts electronic, to have e-filing. And that deadline is coming up in August of this year. And so I went up and asked Stephanie, as far as, is this part of the problem, is that we're not e-filing yet, and so we have all these records, and so we need a place to store them, and so moving her out of the place where she is into another building facilitates that. But that's not the case. They actually have been compliant since 2022, so we are ahead of the ball on that e-filing case. Now, other courts don't have that, like the children's court does not have that, juvenile court, and some of the others. I know municipal court is not e-filing yet, so they may be tiering that down to these other courts, but they don't have any paper records, don't have any trouble with record keeping in their office. And I know she has a couple, maybe 2 or 3 deputies that work with her, and didn't seem like they were it doesn't seem like their particular office needs to move. And it was indicated to me that it was kind of the commissioners was the mover of this kind of purchase of the building. And so there's conflicting things out there. I don't know which is true, because obviously we haven't heard anything from the commissioners. So what's going to happen with that building? I don't know. I do think that one of the big issues with the commissioners that we have right now is that they don't have discussion. I don't know how to ask them that, and to tell them that they need to have discussion in the public meeting. But it's not there. And so if it's not there, then we don't know. And then obviously it feels like it's very secretive, because it kind of come out of the blue, because it really did kind of come out of the blue as far as it being a done deal. So I don't know if that helps. It does maybe give you a little background onto what I've seen and been a part of as far as that building. Obviously we will keep an eye on it. I think there is I don't know if there's a public hearing. Oh, so here's the other part. I did go to So that building is in the city of Kenton, right? It's owned by the commissioners, but it's in the city of Kenton and zoned in the city of Kenton. And so they did have a zoning board of appeals meeting a week or so ago. I did make it to that, and they did talk a little bit about the use of that building, and that it was the clerk of courts that initiated that building. So that's kind of where that information came from. So from the zoning board of appeals, it then will go to a public hearing. So that I don't know what the date is of that public hearing, but they are going. I will put that information out there. But they're going to have a public hearing, and so, I mean, of course, I encourage everybody to show up, even if it's just to find out the information yourself firsthand. Everybody should be there. I would think that Joe was at the last one. So I would think that at least Joe would be at this the hearing, and other interested parties would be there. They're from a city perspective. There's really they're going to zone it from like government school zoning to a business zoning, which would be for the county. There's really no contest of why they wouldn't do that. So other than having people come and voice a different opinion, there's really no reason why Kenton would not change the zoning on it. There's nothing that says that it's going to make any difference. It's not in a residential area. I mean, it's adjacent to the downtown and those kinds of things. And so, but I do encourage everybody to come and participate and get a little bit of information that you maybe didn't have before. And so I know this is kind of long, but I hope it helps. Ask me any questions if you've got them, and we'll just keep following the story along. We'll talk to you later. Bye.